Do you want sunscreen? Callie Foster asked, holding out a half-used bottle toward the tall stranger with sun-reddened shoulders sitting just a few feet from her towel. The man turned his head slowly, squinting against the golden California sun, his dark hair tousled from the breeze, his expression caught between amusement and surprise. "Are you talking to me?" She nodded, eyebrows raised. "Yeah." "I mean, unless you enjoy looking like a lobster." He blinked, then laughed. It was low and warm, and it made something flutter in Callie's chest. "I guess I didn't realize I was burning." "You're definitely burning," she said, getting up from her towel and walking toward him. "Here." "I'm not trying to flirt, I swear. I just can't watch someone roast alive right in front of me." "That's a new one," he said, taking the sunscreen from her. His hand brushed hers, and she felt a jolt she hadn't expected. He wasn't just attractive, he was ridiculously attractive. Strong jaw, eyes so blue they looked unreal, and the kind of presence that made you forget how to breathe. He rubbed the lotion onto his arms, then paused. "I'm Damon Grant." "Callie," she said. "Foster, you here on vacation?" He hesitated a beat too long. "Something like that." She tilted her head, curious. "Something like that." He gave a faint shrug. "Needed a break. Figured Malibu wasn't the worst place to take one." Callie smiled and sat back on her towel. "Well, Damon Grant, you're welcome. I may have just saved you from a week of peeling skin." "You may have," he said, "and I owe you one." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking. About little things, her job at a local animal shelter, his vague mention of managing a company, the best tacos on the coast, and which beach had the softest sand. He was funny, easy to talk to, and asked questions like he actually cared about the answers. By the time the sun dipped low and painted the ocean in gold and rose, Callie realized she hadn't laughed that much in months. "Well," she said, brushing the sand off her legs, "I should head out before traffic hits." Damon stood too. "Can I walk you to your car?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, sure." They walked side by side along the path, silence settling between them like an old sweatshirt, comfortable, not awkward. At her car, she turned to him. "Thanks for not being a creep. Offering sunscreen to a stranger could have gone way worse." He grinned. "Thanks for saving my skin." "Literally?" She opened her door, then paused. "You're not from here, are you?" "No, New York." "Figures, you've got that I wear suits even at brunch vibe." He laughed again. "Guilty." She got in, started the engine, then gave him one last glance. "Well, enjoy your break, Damon Grant." He leaned in just a little, resting his forearms on the top of her car. "Callie Foster, what if I wanted to see you again?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm free tomorrow or the next day or whenever you'll let me buy you dinner." Her heart thudded too fast. "You don't even know me." "I know I haven't laughed like that in a long time, and I know you're the kind of person who offers sunscreen to strangers. That's enough for me to want more." She bit her lip, staring at him. "Okay." "One dinner," he smiled, and it hit her again how effortlessly devastating he was. "Tomorrow?" "Sure," she said, trying not to grin as hard as she felt like grinning. "Text me the place, but if it's somewhere that serves foie gras, I'm out." He laughed. "Got it." "No foie gras." She drove off with her windows down, her heart still racing, the ocean breeze tangling in her hair. She had no idea that the man she'd just offered sunscreen to was the CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, or that he was already falling for her. She just knew that for the first time in a long time she was excited. And Damon, standing on the sidewalk watching her drive away, knew something too. She didn't recognize his name, didn't know his net worth, didn't care about his suits or his penthouse. And that made her more dangerous than anyone he'd ever met, because she saw him not the empire he owned, and that made him want her even more. Callie stood at the edge of the marina, staring up at the restaurant Damon had chosen. It wasn't flashy, no velvet ropes, no valet in tuxedos, but the soft lighting, the subtle gold accents around the door, and the scent of something buttery and exquisite drifting from the kitchen told her this was worlds above her usual taco stand dinners. She straightened the strap of her purse as Damon stepped out from behind the host stand. He wasn't in a suit, but what he wore still looked tailored and expensive dark slacks, a slate blue shirt with the cuffs rolled, and a watch that gleamed faintly under the ambient lights. "You're early," he said, offering a half-smile that looked far less practiced than she expected. "There was no traffic and I didn't want to risk being late," she replied, her voice steadier than the nerves humming beneath her skin. "Is this your place? You seem pretty comfortable back there." "I've had a few dinners here," he said, gesturing for her to follow. "Enough that the host lets me play tour guide sometimes." The hostess led them to a table on the terrace overlooking the water. Boats bobbed gently in the harbor, strings of light casting soft reflections on the surface. Callie slid into her seat, still unsure how she'd ended up here after a spontaneous sunscreen intervention. He studied the menu for only a moment before setting it down. "Do you always talk to strangers on the beach?" "I talk to people if they look like they're about to combust," she said, unfolding her napkin. "But no, not usually. You're lucky I didn't assume you were some kind of sunburned weirdo." "Maybe I am," Damon said, his tone unreadable. Callie met his gaze. "Then I guess I'm taking a chance." His expression softened and he leaned forward slightly. "You were right yesterday. I'm not just here for a break. There's a conference in Santa Monica." "I was supposed to be there, but you weren't." "I wasn't." He didn't elaborate and she didn't push. Instead, she nodded toward the wine glasses already set on the table. "Are we doing a tasting or committing to a bottle?" he chuckled. "Let's commit." "I think we're past the casual sunscreen phase." As the waiter approached, Callie sat back and let Damon order with a confidence that somehow didn't come off as arrogant. There was a quiet authority to him, like he was used to making decisions that mattered but not in a way that demanded attention. "You order wine like someone who has a cellar," she said once the waiter was gone. "I might have one," he replied. "So you're either a sommelier or someone with very expensive hobbies." "I'd say I'm more of a collector than a connoisseur. And what do you collect when you're not?" Avoiding conferences, he hesitated, then said, "Time, privacy, moments that feel real." Callie blinked. "That's not the answer I expected." "What were you expecting? Something about cars or watches or, I don't know, golf clubs?" "I hate golf," he said. "I tried it once. I lasted half a hole before calling for a car." She laughed and the tension eased. The waiter returned with 2 glasses and a bottle, pouring carefully before disappearing again. "All right," Callie said, lifting her glass. "To spontaneous sunscreen and terrible first impressions." Damon raised his. "And second chances that taste better than they should." They clinked glasses, and for a while they sipped and watched the lights flicker on the water. "So what about you?" he asked. "What does Callie Foster collect?" "Stray animals and overdue bills," she replied without missing a beat. "Mostly the first one, though. You work at the shelter, manager. Which just means I do everything no one else wants to. Fundraisers, plumbing, calming down angry pet owners. It's chaotic, but good." There was genuine curiosity in his eyes. "Why animals? They don't lie, they don't pretend. They either love you or they don't, and they let you know right away. That's rare." "Exactly." He swirled his wine, thoughtful. "You live close to the beach, couple blocks." "Tiny place, but I can walk to the water and hear the waves at night." "That sounds peaceful." "It is, until someone tries to teach their dog how to surf outside my window at 6 in the morning. He laughed again, the sound richer this time. "Do you always make people feel like they've known you for years?" She tilted her head. "That a compliment or a warning?" "Definitely a compliment." The food arrived, perfectly grilled fish for him, something with lemon and capers for her. She picked at her plate while watching him with growing curiosity. "So, Damon Grant," she said slowly, "you're not exactly forthcoming, are you?" "I try not to lie. But you also don't tell people much. I've learned to be careful." She paused, then leaned in, lowering her voice slightly. "Are you in witness protection, secret agent, runaway royal?" He grinned. "Nothing that exciting." "Then why the mystery?" He looked out toward the water before answering. "Because sometimes when people find out who I am, they stop seeing me. And they start seeing what I can give them." Callie nodded, digesting that. "That's heavy." It's honest. Well, she said, setting down her fork. I don't know who you are or what you can give me, but I do know this was a really nice dinner. He met her gaze. It doesn't have to end yet, she arched a brow. Are you inviting me somewhere, Mr. Grant? I was going to suggest dessert, but not here. She narrowed her eyes. Define not here. There's a place up the coast, quiet, private, best pie I've ever had. She hesitated, weighing it. Then she glanced down at the untouched wine bottle and back at him. You drive, I pick the music. Deal. He stood and held out his hand. She took it, and his fingers wrapped around hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. She had no idea that just 20 minutes up the highway, he owned the cliffside house where he planned to take her. And he had no idea that Callie Foster, with her oversized purse and animal rescue stories, might be the first person in years who wasn't impressed by any of it. Which made her the most dangerous person he'd ever let into his life. The road curved along the cliffs like a ribbon unraveling beneath the stars, the Pacific stretching endlessly to their right. Callie leaned back in the passenger seat of Damon's sleek black convertible, the engine a low whisper beneath them. The dashboard glowed faintly, casting soft light on his hands as they gripped the wheel. Okay, she said, pointing ahead with her thumb, I have to admit, this is officially beyond my usual dessert routine. He glanced sideways. What does your usual look like? Store-brand cookies and reruns of old sitcoms. Maybe some peanut butter straight from the jar if I'm feeling reckless. Damon laughed, and the sound was deeper in the quiet night. Then I'll do my best to raise the bar. She studied his profile as they drove. In the moonlight, his sharp features looked softer, his jaw less severe. You always drive like this? Late-night desserts and scenic routes? Not really. Usually I'm stuck in meetings or rerouting flights. Flights, she asked, intrigued. He nodded once. Comes with the territory. My company has offices in several countries. Callie raised an eyebrow. You're being vague again. I'm trying not to scare you off. I don't scare easy. He didn't answer that, but the corner of his mouth twitched. They turned off the main road and passed through a narrow gate flanked by flowering hedges. The driveway wound down toward a glass-walled house perched right on the cliff's edge. A series of small lanterns lit the path, casting golden light across the stone. Callie sat up straighter. Wait, this is where the pie is? This is where I keep it, he said as he parked. Figured it'd be easier to bring you here than explain the directions to a place that technically doesn't exist on any app. She climbed out slowly, her sandals crunching on the gravel. You have a house with a view like this and you're worried about scaring me off. He looked at her seriously. I'm more worried about what happens after you see it. She didn't reply. Instead, she followed him toward the house, taking in the sleek architecture and the subtle warmth of the lights glowing from inside. When he opened the door, she stepped into a space that felt suspended between air and ocean floor to ceiling windows, pale wood floors, and a single long table where a covered pie dish waited. You live here? She asked. No, he said, heading into the kitchen. It's a place I come to when I need to think. She followed him, eyeing the open shelves lined with cookbooks and glass jars. You bake? I try, he said, pulling off the lid to reveal a golden brown creation with a flaky crust. This one's blackberry and vanilla bean. She folded her arms. Okay, now I'm suspicious. Why? Because I don't know any man who casually makes blackberry pie from scratch. He picked up a knife and began slicing. I never said I was casual. She accepted the plate he handed her and took a cautious bite, her eyes widened. That's actually incredible. I'm relieved. They carried their plates to the edge of the patio, settling onto two weathered chairs. The night was quiet except for the surf crashing below, the air cool but not cold. So, she said after a while, is this the part where you tell me you're secretly famous? He leaned back slightly. Not famous, just visible. She waited. I own a tech company, he said finally. Software infrastructure. I started it the year I turned 22. It grew faster than I could keep up with, he paused. Now it feels like I'm constantly chasing it instead of leading it. She digested that. How many people know who you are? He looked out at the water. Too many to be anonymous, not enough to be recognized on the street. And you thought, what, that I'd treat you differently if I knew? Most people do, she tilted her head. And you didn't think I'd find out eventually? I was hoping I'd have a chance to show you who I am before you saw the rest. She set her empty plate down carefully. That's a lot of effort for someone you just met, he turned toward her. Is it? She hesitated. I'm not used to this kind of attention. I'm not used to wanting to give it. They sat in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt suspended, like something important hovered between them, not yet spoken. Callie broke it. You're not what I expected, he smiled faintly. Good or bad, just different. You have this whole world, and yet you're sitting here offering me pie. He looked at her, and his voice dropped slightly. I'd offer you more than that if I thought you'd take it. She didn't look away. What if I'm not interested in your world? Then I'll meet you in yours. They stared at each other for a long moment, the wind tugging at her hair, the waves crashing far below like distant thunder. Finally, she stood. You're a lot to process, I know, but the pie helps. He laughed softly and rose beside her. Then I'll keep making it. She walked toward the door, pausing just before stepping inside. What happens now? That depends, he said, following her into the house, on whether you're willing to see me again without the sunscreen or the secrets. She turned to him. I'll let you know after breakfast. His brows lifted slightly. You're staying. I'm not reckless, she said. But I'm also not stupid. That guest room looked like it had ocean views. He reached for a folded blanket on the nearby bench and handed it to her. The sheets are Egyptian cotton. She took it with a grin. Of course they are. As she walked down the hallway, Damon remained in the living room, watching the ocean, unsure whether he'd just won something or stepped into something far more dangerous than he'd ever handled. Because Callie Foster wasn't impressed by money or power or private cliffside homes, and that made her the most real thing in his life. Callie stepped barefoot onto the cool tiles of the kitchen just after dawn, her curls still damp from the quick shower she'd taken in the guest room. The view beyond the glass walls was washed in soft gray-blue light, the horizon blurred where the ocean met the sky. She found Damon already there, barefoot too, standing at the stove in a worn t-shirt and jeans, flipping something in a pan that smelled like cinnamon and butter. He glanced over his shoulder. You're up early. I blame the sun, she said, tucking a knee up onto one of the bar stools, and the scent of whatever that is. French toast, he said, sliding a slice onto a plate. With vanilla bean and orange zest. Of course it is, she said, resting her chin on her hand. Do you secretly moonlight as a chef? No, he said, handing her the plate, but I like mornings that feel earned. She took a bite, eyes widening. Okay. You've officially ruined every future breakfast for me. He leaned against the counter, sipping coffee from a ceramic mug that looked handmade. I can live with that. They ate without speaking for a while, the quiet between them natural, not forced. When she finished, she pushed the plate aside and looked at him seriously. Why me? His brow furrowed slightly. What do you mean? There are women who'd fall over themselves for you. Models, heiresses, people who know what fork to use at a 12-course dinner. I work 80 hours a week at a shelter, and my idea of luxury is 2-ply toilet paper. He set down his mug. You didn't flinch when I told you who I was. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't need anything from me. She raised an eyebrow. So I'm your emotional palate cleanser? No, he said, stepping closer. You're the first person I've met in years who made me feel like I could stop performing. She didn't look away. That sounds like a lot to put on someone you've only known a few days. I know it does, he said. But I also know what it feels like when something's real. And this, he gestured between them, is the first real thing I've felt in a long time. Her voice softened. What happens when I go back to my life, when you go back to yours? I don't want to go back to that life, he said. Not the way it's been. I don't want to spend another year in boardrooms trying to remember what I was so desperate to prove in the first place. Callie stood, crossing her arms. Are you saying you'd give it all up? I'm saying, he said carefully, that I don't want to build something that doesn't have room for this. She studied his face as if trying to see past the surface again. I don't know how to date someone like you. There is no someone like me, he said. There's just me and you. She turned toward the window, the ocean shimmering now with early morning light. I've had people walk away because they couldn't handle my life, the hours, the chaos. The fact that I'll drop everything to save a dog with a broken leg, even if it means missing dinner or forgetting a birthday. I don't need perfect, he said. I need honest. I need someone who doesn't care about the car I drive or the watch on my wrist. She turned back to him. I care about whether you'll actually show up when things get hard. I will, he said. And not just because I want to be the guy who shows up for you. I want to be the guy who builds something with you. Her voice caught slightly. I don't even know what that would look like. Then let's figure it out, he said. Together. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she placed a hand on his chest, right over his heart, and looked up at him. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than comfortable without you. Something in her broke open then, and she leaned into him. He wrapped his arms around her like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. Later that morning, they walked the beach barefoot, hand in hand, her sandals dangling from her free hand, his rolled-up jeans damp from the tide. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them felt full, not empty. When they reached the part of the beach where they'd first met, she stopped and turned to him. You know, she said, if you'd opened with billionaire CEO, I probably would have walked the other way. I know, he said. That's why I didn't. But I'm glad I didn't walk away, she said. Even if I still don't understand how this happened. You offered me sunscreen, he said. That's how, she laughed, the sound brighter than the morning sun. It was expired. I don't care, he said, pulling her closer. It was the start. He kissed her then, right there on the same stretch of sand where it had all begun. And in that moment, it didn't matter that their worlds had been built on opposite foundations. It didn't matter that he'd once lived in glass towers, and she lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a yoga studio. What mattered was that they'd found each other anyway, and neither of them was ever going to let go. The scent of jasmine drifted in through the open windows of Callie's apartment, carried by the breeze that rustled the sheer curtains. She stood barefoot in the center of her living room, a cardboard box on the coffee table, her hands hovered above it, unsure. Inside were the pieces of her life she'd never planned to move. A chipped ceramic mug with a paw print on the side, a Polaroid of her and her staff in front of the shelter's front sign, a stack of worn folders filled with grant proposals and budget breakdowns. All of it grounded her, tethered her to the life she'd spent years building, and now she was about to change everything. You don't have to rush, Damon said from behind her, leaning against the doorway. He'd spent the morning helping patch the back corner of the shelter's fence, his shirt speckled with paint, his palms still faintly stained. I'm not rushing, she replied quietly. I'm just trying to figure out what comes with me and what stays. He walked toward her, his voice low. Then let's take it one piece at a time. She looked up at him, her eyes tired but steady. Are you sure about all of this? I've never been more sure of anything, he said, but I don't want you to give up what matters to you. That's not what this is. I'm not giving it up, she said. I'm just expanding it. He reached into the box and lifted out the photo. I had this framed, he said. It's already on the wall in the new office. She narrowed her eyes. You did what? I asked your team for a copy. It's a good picture. You look like you belong at the head of something, she blinked. That's manipulative, Grant. I prefer persuasive. And where exactly is this new office? In the renovated space behind the main lobby at the new shelter wing we're building, he said. It's yours, full autonomy, full budget. No interference. You bought us a new wing. Technically, the foundation did. She stared at him. You created a foundation, he stepped closer. You said we needed more than donations, we needed structure. So I built one. You did all of this without telling me? I didn't want to promise anything until I could deliver, he said, And I didn't want you to think I was doing it for you. Aren't you?" He paused. "I'm doing it because of you, because you helped me see what mattered. And because I want this to be our life, not just mine that you visit on weekends." She let out a shaky breath. "You're dangerous, you know that," he smiled. "Only when I'm invested." She closed the box and leaned into him, resting her forehead against his chest. "I should be terrified, but you're not." "No," she said, "I'm just completely out of excuses." "Then come with me," he said. "Let's stop pretending we're figuring it out when we already know." She looked up. "I want to keep my place, of course. And I'm not giving up midnight rescue calls or chasing feral cats off rooftops. I'll be there," he said, "with a flashlight. And I need time to transition my team. I can't just vanish." "You won't," he said. "We'll do it right." Together, weeks passed in a blur of planning and goodbyes. The shelter's expansion broke ground with Callie at the helm. Damon stood beside her at the press conference but let her speak first. She announced new programs, training initiatives, and a community outreach plan that brought 3 new sponsors to the table before the week was over. They moved into the cottage overlooking the hills above the coast, a compromise between his need for space and her need for quiet. The walls were painted in soft shades she picked, the shelves filled with his books and her plants, and the kitchen housed a pie dish that never stayed empty for long. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he pulled her onto the back deck where lanterns swayed gently above them. "I have something," he said, holding a small velvet box. She stared at it, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you serious?" "I know we didn't mean for this to happen," he said, "but it did, and I don't want a future that doesn't have you in it." She opened the box. Inside was a band of gold, simple and elegant, with a tiny engraving on the inside, found on the sand. Tears blurred her vision. "You remembered." "I remember everything." She threw her arms around his neck, laughing through the tears. "Yes. Of course, yes." They married on the bluff behind their home, the breeze gentle, the waves crashing below like applause. Her dress was simple, her bouquet made of wildflowers from the garden. He wore no tie, just open buttons and bare feet. Guests came from both their worlds, her shelter staff and volunteers, his board members and childhood friends. But none of it felt like a merger. It felt like a celebration of something entirely new. After the ceremony, as the stars blinked to life above them, Damon pulled Callie into a slow dance on the lawn. "Do you miss it?" she asked softly. "The suits, the skyline," he shook his head. "I traded noise for meaning. I'll never go back. And if I ever forget why we started this, I'll remind you," he said. "With pie and maybe sunscreen." She laughed and pressed her forehead to his. "I love you. I love you more than I ever thought possible." Years later, their home echoed with new sounds: tiny feet padding across tile, giggles chasing after rescued puppies, the clang of toy stethoscopes and miniature food bowls. Callie ran the Foundations program statewide. Damon invested quietly in animal welfare tech and community shelters, always choosing impact over spotlight. They spent their mornings trading shifts and breakfast kisses, their evenings walking barefoot through the garden, hands always intertwined. And sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the breeze rolled in salty from the sea, they'd find their way back to that same stretch of sand where it all began, where a bottle of sunscreen changed everything, and where neither of them ever looked back.